Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, warshippers of all ages, welcome back to YouTube. My name is SeaRaptor, and today we're going to kick off a new Learn to Play series of videos here on the channel. I've been threatened to do it for a long time. We're going to take a look at the Italian destroyer line. Now, I got to lay some groundwork here, okay? If you are brand new to destroyers, if you have never played a destroyer game in your life, I'm begging you, don't play these ships, because you're going to get really frustrated really quickly. In my opinion, the Italian destroyer line is kind of high skill floor, right? Like, you've got to have a pretty good idea of what you're doing. You need to have a decent grasp on some of the mechanics in the game before you dive your toes into these ships. They are not bad ships, not by a long shot. You're going to hear people crap all over these things like they're terrible. They're not. But they play very, very differently from most destroyers in the game. They have very different, kind of a very different function in a match, and as such, new players, in my opinion, are going to be very frustrated with these ships. So if you're brand new to these destroyers, I'm going to tell you straight up, go click on a different video. Go find the video for Nicholas or Mutsuki or something like that. Go try the Americans or the Japanese, or eventually I'll get around to doing the Germans probably, or the EU destroyer lines or something like that. But like, come back to this later, okay? They're good boats, but don't start here. All right. With all of that said, let me kind of help you understand what it is that I feel like the Italian destroyers do really well. Because there's a whole lot of people that just, like I said, they just look at these ships and they're like, these ships are terrible. And they're really not, but you have to understand what they're really good at. The Italian destroyer line, more than any other destroyer line in the game, is really, really good at murdering opposing destroyers and getting away with it. It does that through a combination of ammunition type, speed, available consumables, and honestly, average detection, at least in the start of the line. Now, I have to lay a little more groundwork here, right? I'm starting at Tier 5, which in my opinion is where the line starts properly. Anything before this, you should only take a few games to get through and then get on with it. Tier 5 is where you're going to start running into more human opponents, more challenging things. Between Tier 5 and Tier 8, these ships play very, very similarly. A lot of the skills you develop while you're playing the 5 and the 6 will still be applicable at the 7 and the 8, and you can still have good games, good results in those ships. But at Tier 9, there's a huge, drastic break in how these ships function, their stats, and how they play, in my opinion. So I'm kind of prepping you here, okay? If you find that you like the middle tier ships, enjoy them. Don't be in a rush to get to the Tier 9, because when you get to the Tier 9, everything changes. And I'm going to warn you guys up front, I'm going to try to do these videos one a week, one every other week or something to keep them going. But once I get to Tier 8, I have been struggling myself with the Tier 9 and the Tier 10, right? Adriatico and Attilio Regolo are very, very difficult ships for me to play and learn. So I'm not confident in my ability to teach them just yet, okay? So I'm going to start this video series. I'm going to 100% get the 5 for the 8 done in a relatively timely fashion. But there may be a bit of a break before we can come back and look at the 9 and the 10. Okay, so I'm trying to set expectations here. All right, with all of that said, let's go back. Let's start here and talk about Maestrale. You're at Tier 5. A lot of good destroyers at Tier 5. We're talking about Mutsuki, Minakaze, Nicholas. Even T-22 is really a solid boat these days. There are some questionable ships in this tier, but not too many. Most of them are fairly functional. What does Maestrale do? Well, she is a destroyer bully, and that all begins with survivability. Now, you're seeing here a fully buffed Maestrale, a little over 15,000 hit points. Unbuffed, this hull comes in at, I think it's about 13,400 HP. 13,400 HP at Tier 5. The only other Tier 5 destroyer that's like got more health than this is Jaguar, right over in the French line. Everybody else has less than you. In some cases, they have way less than you, okay? So you have all the tools you need to bully destroyers around between your health pool and your ammunition types. And we're going to get to that, okay? So survivability, not quite best in tier. It's literally top 2. Enjoy this. Maximize it. Abuse it mercilessly, okay? Armor layout. Ha, 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 you're a destroyer. You have no armor. When you get shot, you're going to explode. You're going to feel it. Welcome to a destroyer play in World of Warships. That's just the way it is. There's really nothing to say there. Okay, maneuverability and concealment. Whew. Italian destroyers are fast, as you would expect. Now, they're not French fast, right? The French put just about everybody else to shame, or the Russians, depending on which tier and exactly which ship you're talking about. Now, interestingly enough, down here at tier 5, even the Italians put the French to shame. Maestrale's base speed is 38 knots on the surface. That comes in ahead of every other destroyer in the tier, with the exception of Minakaze, Visby, and Podvoisky over in the Russian branch. I'm not really looking at premiums, but truth be told, none of the premiums are this quick either. So you have a ton of speed. You have an amazing amount of speed to be able to run down opposing destroyers when you need to or when you want to. This is excellent. This is a big strength of the ship. 5 knotting in the turning circle, 2.5 on the rudder shift, pretty average, right? This ship handles well. All Italian ships, frankly, handle well. It's kind of a quirk, an unspoken, unwritten quirk of the line, of all their lines. So yeah, you're going to find good handling in this ship. I think you'll like it. Definitely get used to the handling here at Tier 5. You're going to see a lot more of this as you keep going, okay? Concealment. Full stealth rig on this boat, 6.3 on the surface. Not amazing. You're not worst in tier. Not quite, because again, Podvoisky still exists. We talked about that. Hill, a little higher, but you're definitely on the high end, okay? This is kind of Wargaming's balancing act, right? This ship, as I mentioned earlier, can be a predator against other destroyers. And so one of the ways that Wargaming kind of balances that is they give the other boats a little bit of a leg up, a chance to see you coming, a chance to smoke or run away or duck behind an island or whatever, right? This is really, really good, though. I mean, this is workable. 6.3 sounds bad. It's perfectly fine. It'll do the job for you, okay? Don't worry about it. But just keep in mind that most things you're going to be chasing after will outspot you. So you don't have amazing spotting. Now, you do have plenty of spotting. You have plenty of stealth to spot for your team and all the rest of this stuff, okay? That's good. Okay, main battery. We have to have a very, very long conversation here, so settle in because you need to learn some basics here about the way Italian destroyers function if you're going to understand how to play these ships. You need to learn, I can't emphasize this enough, learn this at Tier 5 where the games are cheap and the repair costs are cheap because you don't want to be trying to learn this at Tier 8 where it's much more expensive to operate the ship. Okay. Your main battery is comprised of 2 twin-barreled guns. These are 120 millimeter guns, kind of a low caliber, 50 calibers, and you see them, they're kind of short, stunty little things, although admittedly, the barrel extends almost all the way back through this mountain. You're only seeing about the forward half of the gun barrel here. You have 2 different shell types on, frankly, a very long reload for the tier, okay? You have HE shells available on a 5.8, HE shells available on a 5.8 second reload. They're roughly average HE shells, maybe slightly below average, let's say, okay? They're not going to be your main focus. You're going to use these shells. You will need to use these shells. You're going to switch ammo types a lot in these boats, okay? But your main shell, the main thing you want to be firing every chance you get are the semi-armor-piercing shells you have access to. Italian destroyers do not get HE and AP. They get HE and SAP. Now, what are the advantages of semi-armor-piercing shells? Well, for starters, they really penetrate nicely. They have a much more difficult to ricochet these shells, right? You can ricochet them, right? Trust me, you can. But these shells are much more likely to penetrate lighter targets. For example, the SAP there, you see, look at the penetration on the HE, right? Armor penetration capacity on the HE shell, 20 millimeters. That's correct, right? You're getting 1/6 penetration. That's the same as it always is for everybody's HE in the shell. HE shells in the game that aren't German, okay? That means that these HE shells will full pin another destroyer, about some battleship superstructure, some cruiser superstructure, that kind of thing, okay? But you probably won't get big hits out of them. However, the SAP you see there, not only does it hit harder, its full pin has a higher threshold. It'll pin 34 millimeters of armor. What that means is when you fire these same shells at a destroyer, right, and you're getting his broadside, let's say, you're not going to bounce these things, you will hit him harder because the shell does more damage. Full penetration damage out of a shell is 1/3 of the maximum damage. So then the 120 millimeter HE shell will do, I'm going to run some numbers here, about 550-ish damage out of the HE shell. Whereas the SAP shell will do nearly 900 damage for the same hit, like 866 or something like that, right? So that's pretty noteworthy, right? You're getting a lot more damage for getting those same shells on target. You only got 4 guns, right? And on like a longish reload. So you want to be firing the SAP at broadside or, long, large angled, lighter targets as often as possible. SAP needs to be your default ammo anytime you're engaging an opposing destroyer. Now, what's the exception when they go bow onto you? When you have a narrow profile and you're shooting directly into the face of an opposing destroyer, and a smart destroyer player who's fought Italian destroyers will do this to you, so you need to be prepared for it, you'll have to switch to the HE. It will lower your damage output, but it's not like you're toothless, right? The HE will still do good work. And sooner or later, if you maneuver correctly or your teammates are shooting at him or whatever, or you fire torpedoes at him, he's going to have to turn. He's going to have to eventually give you the shots you want, and you're going to want to load the SAP and wreck him with it. One other thing we have to mention about the main battery is the firing range. You see there, 6.8 kilometers. That's max range. That's buff. That's with the buff you can get out of the module. That means that it is possible to configure this ship, depending on your captain's skill and everything, so that your main battery range is less than your detection radius, or at least roughly equal to it, right? That sounds terrible. Why is it not terrible? Here's why it's not terrible. It means that when you are, let's assume, for a minute, you're 1v1 fighting another destroyer at close range. Let's say 4 kilometers. You're shooting each other, you have more health. Eventually, you win that fight. Your gun bloom, right, the radius at which you're detected after firing your guns only goes out to 6.8 kilometers. Unless that other destroyer has a buddy somewhere nearby, a submarine, a cruiser, another destroyer, something like this, that's going to pick you up inside of that range. As soon as you kill the guy that's spotting you, you're invisible. No one can spot you anymore. And if there is someone around that can spot you, you have a fancy consumable that we'll talk about in a minute that will let you still sneak away, hopefully still intact. So the 6.8 kilometer gun range is a curse and a blessing. It means you're not able to use the guns in some situations where you might want to. Let's say it's late in the game, you're looking for some extra damage, you want to farm some health off a battleship. You're going to have to get uncomfortably close to him to hit him with your guns. However, it does mean that when you murder the thing that's spotting you, maybe it's a submarine, maybe it's a destroyer, maybe it's even an opposing cruiser, as soon as you murder it, whatever it is, you're invisible again. You don't need to necessarily spend a smoke. When I say Italian destroyers are destroyer on hard mode, this very thing right here is the skill that I'm talking about. Being able to read the minimap and maximize your ability to go dark by murdering the thing that's spotting you and not have to burn a consumable necessarily, okay? Or you're maneuvering away and you're able to get out of the gun, the gun bloom very quickly so that whoever might have a shot on you doesn't anymore. These kinds of things. You have to be able to read the minimap. If you don't have that skill, if you struggle with that skill, if you like taking 4-on-1 engagements, right? This is not a ship for you. Mastering this line of ships is going to be incredibly difficult, all right? Because you just don't have all of the other tools that you would want to stay and hang in a fight. Your job, you are an ambusher. Your job is to move up, contest a cap, preferably backing up someone who's a little stealthier than you, one of those other destroyers, like the aforementioned Minikaze or T-22. Play a little behind him, back him up, help him murder anybody that's in front of him, and then, like John Cena, disappear. That's how you play these boats, in my mind. Certainly in the tier 5, 6, 7, and 8, that's the best way, in my opinion, to play these ships. But it's challenging. It's not always easy. You will fail, right? I fail. I love these ships, and I still fail at it sometimes. They're great boats in a div with another destroyer. Playing them solo can sometimes be an extreme challenge. Really, really good main battery, but you're going to have to spend some time making sure you understand how it works and what to maximize out of it. The good news is that 66-meter dispersion you're getting, because your gun range is so short, you're going to put lots of shells on target. This is excellent. This is really, really good. The shells are great. The hull that delivers the shells is sometimes frustrating because you have to work against this gun range, okay? So you need to learn how to do this here. I said it earlier. If you're going to learn to play these ships, spend the time at Tier 5 and Tier 6 where it's cheap to run the ship, and if you screw up, nobody cares. It's Tier 5. Play it. Understand it. Learn how to maximize that gun range. Work it to your advantage, and learn how to get out of bad situations. Torpedoes. Now, at this tier, these are fairly average, but they're still okay, okay? You're looking at an 8-kilometer range, which on 6.3 detection is kind of crappy, but let's be honest, at tier 5, most boats don't have torpedoes too much longer than this. I mean, the Japanese, I think, like Minakaze caps out at 7, right? So, I mean, this is still okay. They are a little slow. 56 knots, 8,600 on the Alpha is, well, it's not great. 80 seconds on the reload is okay. It's passable. It certainly isn't best in tier. It's not quite worst in tier. It's workable. That's about all I can really say about it. The flood chance on these torpedoes is terrible. That is worst in tier. So even if you do land them, chances are you won't land a flood. I would highly encourage you to take flood flags on this and try to intentionally land these torpedoes in an area where your opponent's not going to have torpedo protection, his bow or his stern. Try to get away from that torpedo bulge in the middle of the ships. If you're firing them at longer ranges, you take what you get, right? But if you're at point blank range, and you can do that with these ships, you'll see some of that in the sample gameplay later on. Try to land these, especially on a battleship, somewhere there's not going to be a torpedo bulge, and you have a much higher chance of sticking a flood. Yeah, we'll come back to the torpedoes in a minute. We'll talk a little more about that. Depth charges. 2 sticks, 10 bombs in a stick, 3,200 in damage means that these are actually pretty good. Now, they're not American good, they're not Japanese good, they're not British good, but they are right in the middle of the pack. 3,200 damage is plenty of damage for you to land these on an opposing submarine, and he's going to know he's been in a fight, particularly since this ship will only ever see Tier 6 submarines. That's more than enough, okay? And the consumables list, we'll come to this in a minute, also gives you an advantage when hunting submarines that other destroyers don't necessarily have. So the Italian boats, hilariously, in a way you wouldn't expect, are actually slightly above average submarine hunters when they need to be, because they can chase down targets without being spotted. Again, we'll talk about that in a minute. And they can put the bombs they put on a target actually hurt badly enough that the submarine will feel them. Nice to see. A defense. You don't have any A defense. You're a Tier 5 destroyer. On top of that, you have the triple curse of being a Tier 5 Italian destroyer, and Wargaming has decreed that the Italian anti-aircraft armaments in this game will be very, very, very bad. So you have a little bit of AA. It's like most of the Japanese destroyers in these middle tiers, it's serviceable enough to like shoot down orbiting fighters. It will not prevent strikes. It will not even deter opposing carriers from coming near you. You will occasionally shoot down a plane. When that happens, take a shot, cheer, go buy a lottery ticket, because that's about all you can really say for this AA. Don't get excited here. There's nothing to get excited about. I don't even think you have any flak. Nah, you got mid-range and short range. You don't even have any flak. Okay, let's talk about consumables first. This is the most important conversation that we're going to have for the rest of the video. You get typical damage control party, right? 5-second duration with a cooldown, no big deal. It's the same DCP you get on pretty much every other Tier 5 destroyer. However, you have 2 consumables that are somewhat unique to the Italian branch. What are they? The first one is what they call exhaust smoke generator. This is, if you've played a Perth or any of the Commonwealth cruisers or some of those ships like a Haida, this is that crawling smoke. Basically, that's what this is. This smoke follows you as you move. So you see there, it has a 27.5-second duration time. That's with my captain's skill and my various flag buffs and everything. I think baseline, it's like 25 or 22 or something. Each puff lasts at least 10 seconds, and it has a cooldown of basically roughly 90 seconds. That's a little slightly buffed, I think, again, with the captain and the flags. So, what does this mean? Remember me earlier talking about how you can hunt destroyers? Hunt submarines. One of the worst parts of hunting a submarine in World of Warships is, while you're doing it, if he's spotting you, all of his teammates are shooting at you, trying to murder you. But what if you had a way to keep moving, to drive right over the submarine without being spotted? Hey, wait a minute, enter the Italian destroyer line. You could potentially, and I've done this, pop your smoke, continue to pursue a submarine, drive right over him, depth charge the crap out of him, he dies, you turn away, and you get away scot-free because your smoke concealed you the entire time from his teammates. So, something to keep in mind. What's another possible use of this particular smoke? Well, you can use it if you need to charge an opposing battleship. This is a playstyle originated with Tier 9 premium Italian destroyer Paolo Emilio, okay, which has even worse detection values than this, but has amazing torpedoes. They're like little nuclear-tipped warheads, essentially. But you can pop your little speed boost. We'll get to that in a minute. Pop your smoke generator, and then go charge a battleship and literally vomit all your torpedoes into him at point-blank range. If you have a teammate who's able to spot that battleship for you and keep him lit on the entire way in, that's a really good gig for you, okay? The trick is, as we mentioned earlier, these torpedoes don't hit all that hard. So you have to consider the health of your opponent when attempting such a maneuver. If you're going after a battleship that has 50,000 hit points, your little 8,600 damage torpedoes are, even if you land all 6, are probably not going to kill him. The biggest alpha strike you can reliably expect to get out of a full 6 torpedo salvo into an opposing battleship, Tier 5, Tier 6, or Tier 7, is about 35,000 damage. So if whoever you're charging, if they have more health than that, chances are they're gonna shrug your torpedoes off and then murder you with their guns. If they have less health than that, chances are they're dying and you're walking away. So you have to gauge that engagement correctly. You have to figure that out. Like, okay, if I land all 6 torpedoes, will it be enough to kill him? And if he's got about 30,000 hit points or less, you have a very good chance of winning that engagement. If he's got 30,000 hit points or more, you are running a real risk of landing all 6 and dying. So just keep that in mind. The exhaust smoke consumable is highly tactically flexible. There's all kinds of amazing uses for this that you won't even think of them until you're in the game. You're like, oh, I can use my smoke and do this. And it's awesome. It's such a great consumable. That's why you only get 3 charges of it, right? One of the ways Wargaming has attempted to kind of balance and frankly nerf these ships a little bit in their time since release is to reduce the number of charges some of the boats further up the line have of this consumable. It's that good. So spend some time here at Tier 5. Learn to play around with it. Try different things with it. Try to find a style that works for you and how you use it, and give it a go. The other consumable you have is emergency engine power. Now, you're used to playing, if you've played, let's say, the Americans and Japanese, you're used to having played a ship that has the standard little engine boost that lasts, I think it's about 2 minutes, and gives you like an 8% boost to your speed. That's not what this is. Read the stats. This is a plus 25% bonus to your maximum speed, but it doesn't last that long, and it's on a very long cooldown. You see here with all the various captain skills and flags, I've got nearly a 20-second duration on a 2.5 minute cooldown. That's a long cooldown for something that only lasts 20 seconds. So this is the kind of consumable. If we talk about torpedo charging an opposing battleship, you might use it for that. You might use it to reposition around the map. You might use it at the start of a match. All kinds of possible uses for this particular consumable. Big speed bonus. If you go back and you look at your maneuverability again, 40 knots. 40 knots. That means by the time I push this thing, I can do nearly 50 knots on the surface for a very short amount of time with a Tier 5 destroyer. That's kind of nuts. So there's a reason they only give you 3 charges of it. If they gave you like 4 or 5, it'd be a little silly. Okay? But like the smoke consumable, there's lots of opportunities to use this. Spend some time in the Tier 5 boat, play around with it, develop some tactics of your own, get comfortable doing things with it that you aren't able to do with other destroyers. This is another reason that I say the Italian destroyer line is a little bit of destroyer on hard mode, because the capabilities of these ships are so radically unlike any other destroyer in the game. You're almost learning a new class. I mean, it's still a destroyer, but it don't play like almost any other destroyer in the game. They're very unique, which is one reason I'm making these videos. They're a ton of fun to play. But when you're learning them, when you're putting time in, trying to figure it out, you got to give yourself some grace. It's going to come slow. You've got 3 module slots. Again, I would recommend Main Armaments 1. I think you should be trying to maximize that engine boost slot, that engine boost consumable. I would highly encourage you to take engine boost modification 1 here. If you can't afford it, engine room protection is the easy default. No big deal. If you don't have the coal for this, is what I'm saying. Okay. You definitely really want main battery modification 2 in this slot, in my opinion. The gun traverse is very handy. If you don't feel like you need this, I would encourage you to pick up aiming systems modification 1. I would not invest in any of the other ones. However, well, I say that. The smoke generator has some value, right? This would give you 20% more duration on your smoke. So like if I were to pick this up, let's plug this in here for a minute. My smoke goes from 27.5 seconds to 33 seconds. So maybe that's not a bad idea, right? So if you're happy with the turret traverse, maybe give this a shot. Okay, so you've got a couple of options here to play around with. I don't think there's really like a bad configuration of this boat. Flags is fairly straightforward. You're going to want to try Juliet Charlie. You're going to want to stick with Sierra Mike, maximize that speed. November Foxtrot reduces the cooldown on your consumables. That's a big deal. maximize your fire and flood chances. That's just more potential damage. And again, smoke duration, right? 10% smoke consumable action time here out of X-Ray Papa Unit 1. You absolutely want this if you can get it. Captain skills. Now, in the sample game you're about to see in a little bit, I did not have Adrenaline Rush. I only had an 11-point captain in the game you're about to see. You don't need to sink a ton of points into these. However, once you do, things start to get a little better. For starters, I always recommend my default 10-point build on almost any destroyer is going to be Preventive Maintenance, Last Stand, Survivability Expert, and Concealment Expert. In my mind, if you spend your first 10 points on basically these destroyers right there, you got a solid foundation. After that, I would highly encourage you to look at Grease the Gears. Adrenaline Rush is an amazing skill for these ships. You want the gun reload to come back. Superintendent, you've got some really good consumables. They sort of define how well the ship plays. An extra charge of these, quite amazing. Fearless Brawler, an excellent skill for these boats. You'll spend a ton of time firing your guns being detected. 10% bonus to your reload while you're doing that lowers that gun reload down over half a second. That's worth a 4-point skill. Now, the shell explosions and A salvos don't get you nothing. You're really taking this for the gun reload. If you don't like that one, the 3-point one back here, again, also just a nice flat 5% main battery reload buff. Solid skill. Gives you a little more AA. It won't make a difference. You're not taking this skill for the AA. You're taking this skill for the buff to your gun reload. What's another one here? Let's see. I don't know. Dazzle, maybe like if you reach a point where because, like Dazzle and Fearless Brawler, maybe not a bad combo together if you've got the points to spend. I don't think I would try it. I mean, I don't think this probably wouldn't be my preferred way to play it, but if you're curious to try it, I don't think it's a bad way to play it. Certainly not at tier 5. I think it's okay. Demolition Expert, maybe worth 2 points. Not a bad one. Consumables Enhancements. This would be a really good one. Both your smoke and your engine booth last 10% longer. That's pretty solid. For 1 point, this lets them come back a little quicker. Also good skills. I would not invest in any of the torpedo skills. You're going to get damage out of these torpedoes. Don't get me wrong. It's not what the ship is really good at. Certainly not at tier 5. If you really want to try this, feel free. I don't think it's a bad way to play the ship. I just don't think it's the best way to play the ship. You don't want to invest in IFHE. You don't want to invest in anything that buffs your AP. You don't have it. Gun feeder, not bad. You're going to be swapping shell types. So for 1 point, you could do worse if you wanted to sink some points in right there. All right, enough jibber jabber. Let's go show you some gameplay and show you what you can actually do with this hull. All right, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to our little sample game here in Tier 5 Italian destroyer Maestrale. Now, one of the things that you're going to notice immediately as I put up the team lineups here is there's about 4 or 5 bots on each side, maybe as many as 6, it looks like, on each side of the team. This is purely a Tier 5 game. This is something that you're going to run into now, at least if you play on North America. If you play on EU, you're probably more likely to get nothing but pure human opponents. But on NA, when you play Tier 5 and below, chances are you're going to have some bots in the mix. It's not a bad thing necessarily, but one of the things you got to learn and you pay attention to is that the targets around you, which ones are bots and which ones are humans. The bots are fairly predictable. They will almost invariably continue to drive forward until dead. Humans, many of them, not always, but many of them, will react a little differently and at least attempt to preserve their ship. So now, as we immediately jet straight up here on the ACAP, I want to talk about Maestrale, right? We've talked about the detection. I'll put the detection values up here so you can see very briefly what this ship does well and what it doesn't do well. And one of the things that it doesn't do well is detection radius. You can see there I have a 7-kilometer detection radius. 6.3 kilometer detection radius. My apologies. It's not showing up in the mod for some reason. But I'm a 6.3 on the surface, which is quite literally less stealthy than everything on the opposing teams. There's 2 French destroyers and a Nicholas over there. And arguably, the Nicholas has more gun power than I do because, well, if you've watched my video on Tier 5 American Destroyer USS Nicholas, you know how good that boat really is. So what am I not doing with Maestrale? Well, for starters, as we talked about earlier in the video, I am not straight away trying to contest the cap. If there was another destroyer here with me, I might make a play for it, or at least hang behind him, a half a kilometer, and be there ready with my guns to back him up. But because there isn't a destroyer here, I'm intentionally, purposely playing off the cap just to kind of get some idea of what's going to go on. Already I can see the Agano up in front of me. I can tell it's a bot. That gives me at least a little idea that he will probably not turn around. He will probably continue straight forward. What I'm looking for is I've got my guns to starboard. I'm looking for a destroyer in the A-cap. Quickly glance at the minimap tells me that one of the Frenchmen is already in mid. There's probably at least one destroyer up here and one at D. So let's see who we end up with. Whoever it is going to outspot me. There it is. Right away, bam, it's the Nicholas. In fact, he's not a 5.8 detection. He's a 6.3 as well. So he has the same detection as I do, but he probably didn't expect me to be in this position. Now, I only have 4 barrels on nearly a 6-second reload, but look how hard I'm hitting this guy, right? 2,500 to 3K a salvo, depending on how many shells I can actually get into him here. He's just now starting to get his guns around. Now, I'm gonna pause this engagement several times because one of the things you need to learn to do when you're going to play an Italian destroyer is you got to keep one eye on the minimap. Even when you're in these knife fight kind of engagements, you got to pay attention. For starters, I've just popped my crazy emergency speed boost, which means my speed is going to go up. I'm doing this on the assumption that the Nicholas is dumping torpedoes at me. I'm trying to throw off his aim. I'm also trying to throw off his gun aim. The other thing I'm trying to do is I'm intentionally trying to close the distance with this Agano off my port side as quickly as possible. Now, this Nicholas doesn't really have many other people to shoot at him. I'm going to go ahead and blow the smoke. The friendly Delphi can see him. It's either him or the Iron Duke or somebody to the south, but now I'm hard spotted on the surface inside 0.2 kilometers of this Agano. Now, I've got to get my torpedo tubes flipped to the other side. This is a bit of a problem here. I'm expecting this Agano to torpedo me, but he doesn't. I'm going to get all of these down range, and as soon as he dies, well, I won't be spotted anymore, and life will feel much better. I might have been able to get away with only one rack there and then finish him off with the guns, but I didn't want to risk it. And the torpedo reload down here at tier 5 is quick enough that it's not that big a deal. I think the torpedo reload is about 70 or 75 seconds. It's not terrible. We keep putting rounds into the Nicholas while he tries to smoke. We do manage to pick him up. And, wow, it's just a whole bunch of violence here because look at all the ships that just bought it. Bots killing bots, bots running into bots, bots flooding out other humans. It's just an absolute travesty. And look at this. We're not even 3 minutes into the game, and 8 ships, a full third of the people in this match, are already dead. Welcome to Tier 5, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the New York player off my north is a human, and he's staying well away from the cap. So my next goal is, now that I'm pretty comfortable, I want to get in here and try to pick up A. The Deli is sitting in smoke out there, his little crawly smoke. You can see he's sort of edging away from the cap. I want to give him a little bit of a wide berth. I'm more focused on getting the points ticking up for my team. These are the Deli's, some of the Deli's torpedoes, but I've got the speed to stay in front of these. No big deal. I'm waiting for my own torpedoes to reload so I can take a stab at launching these into his, like, where I think he might be moving. I'm trying to gauge this here. It's difficult just to kind of gauge. I'm going to try and lead these a spell. There he passes out of his smoke just briefly. I'm going to go ahead and shoot at him right as I end up ducking into, this beautiful Nicholas smoke that was here right as he died. So now we're going to slow down, make this turn, try and finish the cap here. My money says the Deli pushes me. I don't really have anybody backing me up. Let's see what he does. 10 more seconds to the cap. If the Deli's on the ball, he'll be able to get into this cap before I pick it up. Doesn't look like he's going to make it, or if he is, it's going to be very, very close. He's not going to make it. I'm going to grab the cap. But now I got to get moving. So now, as soon as that smoke expires, I would have been spotted on the surface. Right as I was going to drive out of it, and he would have had eyes on me, I went ahead and blew smoke of my own. Now, I have 2 ways I can play this. If you look at the minimap, I can use the island just off my bow and stay to the south of it, loop around, and go after this Deli. What I'm going to do instead, I'm just going to turn right back around and go after this guy. Is this inadvisable? 100%. This is the kinds of things that you will sometimes try, and an Italian destroyer will almost always get you dead in other boats. But this crawling smoke and the fact that I'm moving 37 or 40 knots inside of it means that I can get away with some shenanigans that most other destroyers at this tier can't. Now, I'm going to take some punishment for this play. 100%. He's going to get some damage. He's going to get the fire in. And again, I might could finish him off with the guns, but why risk it? We're going to go wide with the torps just to make sure we get enough in. Now, check. I want you to observe something. This guy's about to die. Right now, he's spotting me for the New York, but watch what happens as soon as he explodes. I'm invisible.
Incrociatore nemico affondato.
Even though I had just fired my guns, my gun bloom radius is only 6.8 kilometers. That gun radius in an Italian destroyer, we talked about this early in the video, but I'm going to say it again to make sure you hear it. It looks like a detriment. It's not always. It's not necessarily. You have to learn how to play and to that small gun bloom and use it to your advantage. Now, I've gotten a little caught out here, right? The bot Königsberg moving towards me has wandered into my detection range. So now I'm spotted for this New York off my starboard side again. I can't help it now. I'm 30 seconds from my last smoke. I'm going to just have to get into a gunfight with this guy and hope for the best. The SAP's not going to do very much into his bow, so I've got the HE in the barrel, just trying to get whatever I can get. A lot of times when you play an Italian destroyer, you're going to find yourself like, well, I'm lit anyway, I might as well be shooting. It's one of the things that makes me wish they had a heal. They don't, so you've just got to make the best of it. Now, my smoke's 7 or 8 seconds away here. The Königsberg is not really in a position where I'm going to get a ton of help. I do get somebody gets a good citadel into him right there. Now, this is probably a bit of a mistake. I went ahead and smoked right here when that Königsberg is on 1,000 or 1,400 HP. So instead of staying out where I could have probably finished him off at another salvo or two and then smoked if it was really that big a deal. Actually, if I'd killed him, I wouldn't have needed to smoke. So this smoke right here is a mistake. In the end, I'm going to work it to my advantage. I'm going to do exactly to this guy what I did to the deli. I'm going to turn around. I'm going to go back to him. I'm going to get in his face, and I'm going to finish him off. And I'm going to do that because I have 6,300 hit points, and he only has 1,000. See what I mean? We're used to thinking in ways that destroyers won't charge a cruiser, but there are absolutely times that you really should. You can see here now, this is one of those instances where I really wish that I had adrenaline rush on this captain, and I don't. This is, by the way, after this game, I went ahead and spent the points to put adrenaline rush on the captain, but for this particular game, I didn't have it. See here, right here, right here. Here's where I should have used my last smoke. Instead, I don't have it. I'm going to have to just go into this one the old-fashioned way. I'm going to get secondaried all the way in, and he's going to turn invariably and probably try to get his main battery turrets on me here. Now, his main battery turrets are going to struggle. In fact, I don't think he's going to land a single shell. He might land one here with the number 3 turret here as I turn out. So now we talked a little bit about the idea of doing like Paolo Emilio style charges in Italian destroyers. It frequently will not work. In this instance, it's going to work because I think this is a stock hull Conte di Cavour rather than an upgraded one. But this guy has a lot of health. He's got 37,000 HP coming into this engagement, and my torpedoes don't hit all that hard. I got to land them all, right? This has got to, I mean, I can't screw this up. So I'm intentionally, I know I'm going to take some punishment here. Like, it's going to happen. I'm trying to make sure, okay, there's an 18k hit. See, technically, if I can land them all again, that'll be another 18. I'm going to use a little more chip damage with the guns. I want to make extra sure, and we're going to trade here. So that's a situation where, again, if I'd had the smoke, I probably would have been okay. I probably would have survived it. So you can see kind of there's some of the mistakes that you can make, you know, especially at the low tiers when you've only got 3 smokes and 3 charges of the speed boost, right? That you can be like, oh, that engagement could have been more optimal. I mean, look at it. I've got a Kraken. I've got 100,000 damage in exclusively a tier 5 game. This is 100% an excellent result in Maestrale. My point is simply that when you're trying to learn a ship, when you're trying to teach yourself a ship, you've always got to be looking for the optimal play, minimizing your mistakes, etc., etc. And that was an instance where I smoked, again, that engagement against the Königsberg when I didn't have to. That played into later. I needed that smoke against the Conte di Cavour, and I didn't have it, and that's why I'm dead. In the end, though, I've got 5 kills, a whole pile of damage. My team's going to clean this up, and we're going to win a really nice little game here that didn't even take all that long. Look at that. We're not even to 9 minutes, and we're already good. Life is good. So let's go ahead and fast forward to the end here. There we go. Team cleans up the New York, who sailed around the edge of the map. By the way, guys, in a 4-cap domination game, the 1 line is not going to be the place you're going to try to win the game from, as that New York learned. Solid little game here at Maestrale. Look at that, 900,000 credits in a Tier 5 game. I mean, yes, I'm using the blue boosters, but still, 900,000 credits in a Tier 5 game, that's pretty solid. 5 kills, obviously. I got my Kraken. I got me a Dev Strike. I think this was, what, 15? Yeah, almost 2,000 base XP. Now, again, there's a lot of bots in this game, and bots are dumb and somewhat predictable, but only 2 of my 5 kills are bots, right? The Königsberg and the Agano. Everyone else that I killed was a human. So, I mean, of the 6 opposing players, like there were 6 humans on the other team, right? Oh gosh, that bot Königsberg was their top score. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 humans on the other team. Excuse me. I killed 3 of them. So that's a nice result in a tier 5 boat. Most of the damage in this game out of the torpedoes. That won't always be the case. I said it earlier. I'm going to continue saying it. You will probably not rack up vast, huge damage totals in these middle and low tier Italian destroyers. But you can absolutely impact a game in outsized ways with your ability to bully destroyers and control cap points. And again, a nice pile of credits here. Certainly aren't going to complain about that with all the bonuses. I mean, even without the... Okay, so without the bonuses, it's a 300k game, and then with the bonuses, we definitely turned it up a notch. And of course, the operational cost for a tier 5 boat is very, very low. All right, ladies and gentlemen, there she is, tier 5 Italian destroyer Maestrale. I hope we've been able to lay a foundation for the rest of the line and some expectations. These are really good ships. You're probably not going to rack up world-shattering damage records in them, but they're very, very good cap contesters. They're very, very good at murdering other destroyers and giving your team an advantage in that department. If you approach them from that angle, I think you'll enjoy the line. The ships from here only become more capable, but the style of play and what you're going to be doing between here and the tier 8 doesn't change radically. We'll talk more about that when we get to tier 6's Aviary next time. In the meantime, wash your hands, be safe. I'll catch you later.